Welcome to the first episode of the Weekend Show with Rabia. We have with us Dr. Muhammad Dahiru Aminu, who is a policy manager, Clean Air Task Force Africa. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rabia.
Yeah. The theme for today's Weekend Show is energy and sustainable development. We're going to ask Dr. a few questions. Dr. Muhammad, what do you think are the key components that will reduce pollution in the Nigerian oil and gas sector?
So Nigerian oil and gas sector, I think it's basically the same, whether it's Nigerian oil and gas sector or, an oil and gas sector in any emerging economy. I believe that one feature of emerging economies is that there is probably less strict or stricter regulations, relative to the advanced economies. So we have heard of the multinationals in Nigeria that have been here in Nigeria since the 1950s, and a lot of the community that hosts their activities in the Niger Delta have been complaining about their activities that have affected the immediate environment. So I feel the first point of call will be to come up with very strict policies to ensure that all of these multinationals comply with best practices, globally. So if you are an MNC and you feel that there are stricter regulations in the Norwegian North Sea, for instance, you will find out that you will have to do all you can to ensure that you comply with those regulations in the North Sea. But why wouldn't you do the same or replicate the same standards when you come to Africa? So I think that is the first point of call. Having strict or very strict and stringent regulations are important in checking the activities of the oil industry in Nigeria in particular, and probably in Africa in general. But then if you consider the granularity, on how the oil industry operates, whether it's in Nigeria or in other regions, you realize that there is a lot of pollution coming out from oil and gas activities. We mentioned earlier that carbon dioxide is a chief pollutant. It's the cause of half of the problems of climate change or global warming in general. Short-lived climate pollutants like methane and black carbon and soot are also, as much deleterious to the environment as carbon dioxide. So if you take a place like Port Harcourt, for instance, you realize that there are reports that you will wake up in the morning in Port Harcourt and, on top of your car, once you put your finger on top of your car or somewhere outside, a surface outside, you realize that there is a lot of soot on your hand. But people are breathing all of these, and these are probably because there are illegal refineries out there that government is not checking their activities. So I think...
are they carcinogenic?
I believe they are. Okay. I believe they are. So, and this is why there is the need to have clean air. Maybe we don't have those statistics in Nigeria, but I know that in developed countries, there are statistics that show that a lot of deaths happen every year as a result of air that is not clean for human breathing. So I believe those are, issues that are very serious, and governments and regional authorities need to take note of that. I believe strict regulations are important. But again, maybe issues like new technology, adapting to new technology that is climate friendly, that is climate smart. Consider carbon capture and storage. I've always loved carbon capture and storage because that's an area that I think I'm a bit familiar with due to my specialty as a geoscientist. So I believe that technology is effective, is environmentally friendly, and it is a bridge between renewables and fossil fuels production. So if you have carbon capture and storage in place, you can do your oil and gas activities as much as you want without causing much damage to the environment. And you can consider technologies like direct air capture, which is basically going out to the atmosphere and sucking up greenhouse gas. And it doesn't matter where, your DAC equipment will be placed, whether it's in Abuja or in the middle of the Sahara Desert, it will capture the same amount of carbon dioxide. This is because we share the same roof all over the world, so whatever greenhouse gas that goes out to the atmosphere is probably evenly distributed. So technology is important, but again, technology rests on research and development. You need funding for research and development.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of these things are linked to each other, but and they could be complex if we want to make it complex, but again, they can be simple depending on how we want to look at these and also analyze them at granular levels.
Okay, so you think Nigeria needs to do more to ensure a clean air?
Yes, I think Nigeria needs to do more, but then I also think that Nigeria is doing a lot.
Okay.
I think Nigeria is an exemplary country in Africa. Okay. Working with Clean Air Task Force, I can say that.
Yeah, we have people like you, why not?
So I can say that, Nigeria is the first African country to have a methane regulations for the oil and gas industry. We have been working with the NUPRC, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, and we've been able to come up with a methane regulations for the oil and gas industry, the first of its kind in Africa. And we are in the process of helping to ensure that that regulation is well implemented. We are doing the same, trying to achieve the same in other countries like Ghana. Hopefully we will be able to do these kind of engagements in countries like Gabon and a lot of other countries where oil and gas activities take place in Africa. So I think Nigeria is doing well, considering also the fact that we have the energy transition plan in Nigeria. I think it's one of the first in Africa. We have a Nigerian Council on Climate Change that was established after an act was approved by the former president Buhari at COP, I think, or during the same, around the same time that COP was taking place, COP26 was taking place in Glasgow. And that act is very comprehensive, and it has provided for the establishment of a National Council on Climate Change, which is probably one of the few of its kind, in Africa. So I believe Nigeria is doing very well. But maybe we need to do more.
We need to do more, right? In your own opinion, sir, what do you think is the way forward for energy and sustainable development in Nigeria?
Thank you, Rabia. So I think that energy is a broad term. Sustainability in itself is also a broad term. But basically, when you talk about sustainability, you are thinking of how can you best utilize your resources today, and how will that be effectively utilized such that it does not have an impact on the immediate environment, as well as how do you keep that for future use? So how do you make sure that the future generations do not suffer from what you are doing today? I believe that we have to think of a variety of technologies. We have to think of how best we could utilize or change our operations in various sectors of the economy. We have to think of stricter policies in place so that you can find ways of doing these without much damage to the environment. So what can you do, for instance, to help to continue to ensure that there is no effect on the environment, on society in general, as well as on governance. So this leads you to issues about ESG, and ESG is all about what can you do so that if you want, you can make profit without having a problem on planet and on the people. So I think we could go into the specifics. You could think of things like advanced emission control. If you consider the fact that, for instance, carbon dioxide and methane are issues that are at the front burner of discussions globally, you will think of what can you do to reduce these emissions. On the one hand, you have carbon dioxide, which is considered to be a long-term climate pollutant. It could take several years in the atmosphere for it to begin to have effects. So if you are working on carbon dioxide, what you are doing is that you are probably ensuring that you don't have effect on the environment in the long term. But you can also think of issues like methane, which is what I am currently focusing on at Clean Air Task Force. So methane is a short-lived climate pollutant. It causes problems that carbon dioxide will probably take 100 or 200 years to cause. Methane can do that within 1 or 2 decades. So what technologies do you have in place? If you go to the oil industry, maybe you will think of technologies like direct air capture. You can think of carbon capture and storage. You can think of even renewable energy. How do you bring in renewable energy on oil and gas platforms, for instance? How do you ensure that there is good water management? If you drill oil, one of the things that you learn in drilling and production is that there is the need to use a lot of quantities of water. You inject water into the reservoir, you are producing oil alongside water. So what do you do with produced water? How do you take care of produced water? How do you ensure that oil activities or oil and gas drilling activities in general do not have an effect on the offshore environment, which is basically water? How do you ensure that you can fund research and development, to see the best possible ways for optimizing your production while reducing effect on environment? You could think of community engagement. How do you ensure that local communities are not affected by some of the activities of the industry? How do you ensure that there is fair play, there is environmental justice, and so on? So I think it's a very broad issue, but it should mainly be seen from the perspectives of operations, from the perspectives of technology, and also from the perspectives of policy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. It was nice having you here. We've gained so much knowledge. We hope to put it into process, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.